Hello and welcome to the FinextraTV virtual studio. Today I'm talking to Seshika Fernando of WSO2 and Constantin Mareș, OTP Bank in Romania. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie.
Glad to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you here in the virtual studio. And today we're talking about navigating that friction between delivering great customer experience and meeting challenges around securing customer data and preventing fraud. So Constantin, I'm going to come to you first as OTP Bank Romania. How does your bank balance the need to provide modern and competitive customer experience with protecting customer data privacy? And if you can give us an example of this when it was particularly challenging and you overcame it, that would be good.
Yes, indeed, this is a very balancing act that the banks have to do. We are talking about a period in which, after COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen an increase in cyber attacks, and the banks have to step up and had to be at the level of the challenge. And they needed to do a lot of investments to protect the customers. However, on the side of the customers, banks are not only compared with the other banks. Banks are compared with what is the top of customer experience and user experience. We are compared with Meta. We are compared with big tech companies, and that's a challenge in itself. And an example in which we invested a lot also in providing a good customer experience and also securing the back was when we offer the customers the possibility to onboard remotely without being present to the bank. And can be pretty annoying for a customer to ask for a selfie, to ask for a picture of the ID, and to turn the face in different directions. However, we did that, but on what we say on the tip of that's the only tip of the iceberg. The majority of the effort and the investments are in securing understanding where the customer is and what the customer behavior is, and to prevent frauds and to prevent attacks on the customer accounts and customer funds. And that's where we always look at preventive analysis of the transactions, real-time predictions, and communication with the customers, and also training our staff on how to treat the attacks, because also we know that one of the successful techniques of attacks is phishing or social engineering. So we prepare on all these fronts. And again, it's a balancing act that it is not easy to do, because you need to touch everything, and the chain is as strong as the weakest link.
Balancing act, chain as strong as the weakest link. And I'm sure, Seshika, in your experience, because you've worked with all types of banks and sizes of banks globally, so how do you see banks navigating this customer experience and security balance? And perhaps you can also mention in your answer some of the common mistakes that banks make and how they can avoid them.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. And I'm also very glad to hear Constantin's point of view, because it seems like the same thing that we hear from, the largest tier one banks in the world, all the way to the smallest credit unions. It's the real struggle it's the balance really that's the struggle. And from a technology perspective, our idea is that this balance is there because technology is limiting banks to continue to have this balance, because authentication that is available today through customer identity and access management systems, we call them CIAM systems, is user driven. These systems expect the user to provide information on what they know, what they have, what they are at different points of the digital banking session, in order for banks to ensure that it is in fact the customer behind each of these transactions. And I really hear Constantin's perspective where, banks have to compete with the likes of Amazon and Netflix, where, consuming is so easy because the veracity and the authenticity of the customer doesn't have to be continuously checked throughout a session, as opposed to in the banking world, where each transaction that is performed has a serious circumstance behind it. But the user-driven authentication is what's causing that problem, because the more the bank wants to ensure that it is the customer and the intent of the customer to perform that transaction, the more the bank has to interrupt the customer from what they're doing and ask for a password, or ask them to look at their device, or smile this way, right? But if banks can move away from such user-driven authentication systems to data-driven authentication mechanisms, then that really liberates an organization to be able to do authentication verification in the background using data that has been collected over a period of time. So how that works is, then a customer profile would be created based on data that is collected over a period of time. And when the customer is interacting with the system, interacting with the digital banking channel online, that behavioral data will be compared against the historical behavior and the historical patterns that the bank has collected. Now, this type of technology is not frequently used, it's not prevalent, but it is new, and it gives hope to banks in a way that banks are enabled to walk away from this customer experience and security seesaw into a virtuous cycle where, when you perform more, you can perform more authentications because it happens in the background. And when you do that, the consumer is not interrupted, and then the consumer continues to engage, generating more data, which then again feeds back into a great and comprehensive authentication mechanism. So I think the future is for us to lean towards data-driven authentication and slowly but surely move away from, or rather reduce our user-driven authentication footprint to solve the problem.
Constantine, I can see you nodding to that. So what would your response be?
It was not supposed to be a sales pitch or an educational talk, but I'm impressed by this, and for sure I want to find out more about this. A quick question: is there any bank using this type of data-driven authentication already?
Yes, we know a few banks, a very few banks the world over that are doing that. Obviously, it's a mix, because you would never get rid of your credentials. You'd have to log in with the username and password combination. But as you go during the session, the system is able to make decisions on how risky a particular transaction would be, and what kind of risk factors and what kind of authentication factors can be used in that scenario to pass that verification without having to interrupt the consumer. And therefore, the interruptions will be minimized, and they will be saved for the really high risk situations.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I'm very much interested in exploring this. Indeed, if we can sweeten the pain of the customer, that's what we want, and of course we want that not at the expense of the security. And I love what you told. So thank you.
I'm enjoying what I'm hearing, these words: sweeten the pain of the customer. And Seshika, you spoke about this balance, like a seesaw, trying to get it right. And it's wonderful to hear that many banks are implementing new security technologies. And you spoke earlier, Seshika, about perhaps using more data than user-driven. So in terms of new security technologies, what are your thoughts, and I'll come to Seshika first for this one, and then yourself, Constantine, on adaptive authentication and biometrics? Can you share an example of where this has enhanced the customer experience?
Well, It's like this. I think adaptive authentication certainly is a first step in reducing that pain, because it is then, authentication decisions are taken based on algorithms, which then enable the bank to understand, do we really need to authenticate this transaction? Is this a high-risk transaction or is it a low-risk transaction? And look at different aspects of the transaction to understand what part of this transaction really requires a further verification. So that is the adaptive nature of adaptive authentication, and that is how it's one method of reducing the interruptions to the consumer. But essentially, when you look at biometrics, once again, it's certainly better than typing in a password or taking your gaze away to another device to press a button, or worse yet, read a OTP from that and type that back in. But still, it could still be better if the consumer is not interrupted at all. And while the consumer is engaging, the bank is looking at their keystroke patterns, where they're logging in from, what the IP address is, what type of beneficiary they're doing the transaction to, and doing all of these checks and balances in the background, as opposed to taking a step to interrupt the consumer.
And Constantin, I throw that one to you. So thank you, Seshika. Constantin, what about you? What are your thoughts on adaptive authentication and biometrics? And do you have a story yourselves within your own bank of implementing a new technology and that has been successful in enhancing the customer experience?
Indeed, we do, and we implemented biometric facial recognition, and that had a very positive impact on our clients, because they didn't have to put again the password, and we have the second factor authentication that is also a problem, and to replace this by biometry was a very good improvement in the customer experience. What I wanted to mention that on, let's say, on top of this biometric, we also have this type of analysis of where the customer is trying to connect and what was his previous connection from. Is the IP range he's connected from in the same neighborhood? So to try to understand whether that is a genuine connection or is maybe an attack, that the customer phone was compromised and something that we don't understand. And again, I think these type of investments are win-win. It's win for the customers, win for the bank. And this is the type of investment that I always will pay off the return on investment for everyone in the circle.
So your experience has been positive in that direction.
Yes, very positive. And even with the previous example that I gave with the video identification, even that was a bit annoying. Customer appreciated that because it was a time when they couldn't get out of the house. And that was very much appreciated. And actually, that allowed OTP Bank in Romania to grow its market share significantly, because we are a faster bank in adopting such tools, digital tools, and that allowed us to step up, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you, Constantin. And Seshika, when it comes to talking about a successful customer experience strategy, how do you think banks ultimately can use technology differently to achieve better goals, even that seesaw, so to speak?
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the seesaw, because I think there's a different seesaw that we need to focus on when we look at a successful customer experience strategy. And I feel that seesaw is, between personalization and privacy. Because, improving customer experience these days in any industry is all about personalization, isn't it? It's about making it really, just right for the customer and useful to the customer. So if you look at the financial services, I feel there are two levels of personalization that you can achieve. You can achieve personalization very easily by looking at the data that you already have about the customer, their financial portfolio, how their financial position is organized. And you can run various algorithms and recommend, better ways of investing the money and better ways of maintaining that position. And that is quite useful to customers. But if you really think about it, the next level is to really be able to provide financial products and services that map or align with a customer's life events. So offering a salary account when they get their first job, for example, or offering a mortgage after a customer gets married, or a children's savings account when they, have a childbirth. So how can a bank offer that kind of services and that kind of personalization, because that kind of data is not continuously maintained at the bank. It's usually available in external data sources like social media feeds. So the idea here is to make use of these growing ecosystems, enterprise ecosystems, where now industries are connected via APIs. And we are moving towards an ecosystem economy, where it is common for consumers to agree to share data from one enterprise with another enterprise that may be even in a different industry. We've kind of done this already in the banking sector, where we did open banking. But that was the other way around, where the consumer asks the bank to share their financial data with some third parties. But now it's time for banks to benefit back and create that awareness with the customer that if you share some external data with the bank, this is the level of personalization that can be achieved for you, and this is how you can benefit. And also provide the controls to the customer so that that consent can be given in a fine-grained manner to specify what data gets shared with whom, for how long, and for what purposes. And also the control for the consumer to be able to take that away or change that in the future when they change their mind can be very powerful and can enable a bank to maintain that balance between personalization and privacy and control for the customer. So this is very well provided for by API technologies as well as data-driven CIAM technology that provides for that consent capture, consent management, and control of their data for the consumer. So I think those are some key ingredients in creating a winning customer experience strategy.
Thank you, Seshika. And Constantin, we're talking about key ingredients. And as we bring our interview to a close, would you like to add anything to that?
I really like what Seshika mentioned about this privacy and protection versus benefit of the customers. Indeed, I have the feeling right now that the regulators protect the customers, which is more than fine. But I have the sensation that they overprotect the customers, so they cannot really benefit from this ecosystem that I really believe that this will be the future. The customer in the future of in a matter of years, not very long future, they will not care who provides the banking service or the insurance or whatever is behind. They need to have end-to-end service, as in the example that Seshika gave. If a newborn arrives to the family, I want to have an experience where I buy a baby cart, I have a finance and life insurance in one go, and then from my app, they don't have to know, the customer doesn't have to know who is providing the service behind the scenes. So I really share this view and perspective about the future.
Thank you, Constantin. And Seshika, thank you. We could actually go on and on with this discussion, I feel. So maybe we need to have a part 2 some other time. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you as well. It was nice to meet you both.